Thank you very much, President Button. Delegates, appreciate the warm welcome on behalf of what it looks like a pretty good sampling of MLAs and government officials that are here. Looking forward to the deliberations that will happen as a result of Bear Pit as well. It was a pretty amazing sports weekend for the province of Saskatchewan, just this weekend past. Deb's alluded to Graham Dillette tied for second, his second such T2 as they call it on the PGA, and then John Ryan, Regina's own John Ryan, the very first Saskatchewan person to win a Super Bowl. Not all the sporting news is good, however. We're losing Weston Dressler, as you've heard, and I wonder if you would help me with a little project this morning. Since Weston Dressler announced and the Riders announced that he would be released to join an NFL team, a yet I think undisclosed NFL team, I've had a lot of people tweeting me and on Facebook asking that we make him an honorary citizen of the province of Saskatchewan for all he's done for Saskatchewan and his great contribution. It seems reasonable, but I have checked, and though Executive Council has the ability to make proclamations and orders in council, we do not have the authority to make someone an honorary citizen of Saskatchewan. It strikes me, though, that this room might be able to help. For in this room, we have several members of the cabinet. I think there will also be members of the opposition. There will be urban municipal leaders, obviously, from across the province. There's some rural municipal leaders right down in front. We have Chief Perry Bellegarde from the FSIN representing that level of order of government in our province. So I'm going to propose a motion, if you will, and take a picture, and then we're going to tweet it, and we'll tag Weston Dressler on the tweet. The motion is pretty simple, that this convention and guests resolve that Weston Dressler is an honorary citizen of the province of Saskatchewan. Hang on now. All right, all in favor, raise, there we go. There we go, take a couple. Opposed? Abstentions? No bomber guests from Winnipeg want to abstain? Ladies and gentlemen, I have a 7-year-old friend. Actually, he's the son of a colleague that I work with who had a discussion with his mom earlier last month. He said, what are those promises you make at the start of a year? And she said, oh, New Year's resolutions. And he said, yes. Jacob said, yes, New Year's resolutions. He said, I've been thinking of one that I would like to make. He said, my resolution, Mom, is that I think I need to eat a lot more bacon this year. And he said, I'd like you to help by making more bacon. I'd like you to help me keep that particular resolution. Now, I don't know if that resolution was a part of some sort of longer-term plan that Jacob had, but it struck me when she told me that story that we all make resolutions in one way or another. We do it in terms of government at the budgeting table. We make very specific decisions, but our chances that those resolves, those specific decisions are going to work, are going to have staying power, are a lot better if they are a part of a long-term plan, if they're part of a long-term vision. You had Ted Gilletta here this morning. There's a great example of someone who's made a lot of very specific resolves and decisions, but they clearly have been part of some long-term goals and objectives that he had. I believe that our municipal governments do just that. I do believe that you take a look at the long-term issues you're facing and the plans you have for your municipalities as you make specific decisions. And so we should. We certainly are trying to do that at the provincial level. Sometimes it gets hard, as you know. The electoral cycle sometimes intervenes, or there are some very urgent decisions that need more expedient decisions. And I sometimes wonder if we're always then able to focus on the long term, even as we make some short-term resolutions. But we are going to continue to try to do that at the provincial level, and I think you are too. Our growth plan will inform those specific decisions. And some of you who have heard me speak before might be thinking, oh no, he's not going to go over the growth plan again. And yes, I am, actually. Because it's our North Star. It's what guides the government of Saskatchewan. And by the way, it's going to be able to lead us into a bit of a discussion today, and I'm sure followed up in the Bear Pit, about where that growth plan intersects with what you have planned for you municipalities and the decisions that you have to make. So, of the 6 components of the growth plan, first and foremost, we have infrastructure. We have an infrastructure deficit in this province. Arguably, we had it before the very rapid growth began occurring in Saskatchewan, and so now it is even more acute. That shortage of infrastructure is even more acute. It is why, ladies and gentlemen, I believe, and by the way, this is very much subject to debate across the province today, it is why I believe we're going to need an all-of-the-above approach to the methods to building infrastructure in Saskatchewan. We're going to have to pursue infrastructure building with conventional means, with government funding projects, municipalities funding projects, as they always have. That's going to be a part of it, even as we build new schools, for example, which are part of another debate, and I'll get to that in a moment. We're going to need to be able to partner with you and fund things as we've always funded them. We are going to need a meaningful partnership from the federal government as well. And so the provincial government, just like your government, just like the rural municipalities, just like First Nations, are waiting to hear the specifics around Building Canada. And I noted in the papers this morning there are some municipal leaders from across the country saying we need to find those details out very quickly. Just so you know, I think I said this last year, it bears repeating. We're ready with our part. We have a Sask Builds Fund that's prepared to be and ready to be committed to this tripartite approach that the federal government's going to take. And beyond that, we know we're likely going to need to look at some specific conventional infrastructure funding, especially around water works across this province. As I have traveled around Saskatchewan, I've heard from you very directly that, especially from those small and medium-sized communities, that water and sewer projects are needed. We're going to need to pursue conventional models of infrastructure financing. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to need to pursue innovative new ways to finance infrastructure. This is not an ideological question. This matter has been settled, frankly, across the country and across North America and around the world. In fact, because we may be a little late to this particular issue, we're going to benefit from the fact that the various generations of P3s have provided great lessons for the rest of us that are now coming with very similar P3 projects and will need to come with P3 projects here in Saskatchewan. But it will be a continued debate, and hats off to Mayor Fougere and the council in the city of Regina for leading this province in that debate with the referendum that occurred here in our capital city. There are those in union leadership positions and some in the political arena that will ideologically oppose these. And I will tell you this, we will simply not be able to keep up with the infrastructure demands of this province. We will not be able to meet the infrastructure needs of this province in a way that ensures we're not getting in the way of growth any more than we already are if we aren't pursuing an all-of-the-above strategy, if we don't engage with the private sector, if we don't engage with P3 Canada. I think that P3 Canada is entertaining proposals for bridges today in this province, and probably for a very large bypass project. And without that kind of commitment, both from the federal government and an innovative way to finance it, I don't know how we get those large projects done. And then, what does that do to the queue in terms of smaller projects? Infrastructure is a priority for us, though, ladies and gentlemen, and I would just offer this, that the best indicator of future action is past behavior. $850 million is being spent on infrastructure this year. We're on track to meet our growth plan commitment of $2.5 billion over the next 3 years. Crown corporations spent about $1.9 billion, supported some of it by borrowing in a supported way, on capital projects that have been desperately needed. In 2013, they'll spend another $2 billion in 2014. Altogether, government and Crowns have spent $13.2 billion on infrastructure since 2008, double what was spent in the previous 6 years for projects like the West Regina Bypass, to the extent it's completed already, the Estevan Truck Bypass, a twinning of 11. Not enough highways yet, but quite a bit of highways money spent all over the province. Integrated healthcare facilities in places like Shellbrook, Parkland Trades and Technology Center in communities like Yorkton, $225 million for Head Start on a home. And by the way, with respect to the housing issue, we need to thank municipalities who've decided to take a leadership role in trying to ensure that the markets have the incentives to supply housing for this province. There are still some places where vacancy rates are very tight, but we've seen marked improvement. And we're going to continue with our direct building through Head Start on a home, with infrastructure, and also with incentives that we can offer to partner with you to make sure that we are dealing with the housing issue in Saskatchewan. So infrastructure is the first component. The second component of our growth plan is the human resource piece. We have a labor shortage in Saskatchewan. It's a challenge, but it is a better challenge to have than what we used to experience in Saskatchewan. Even in this current fiscal year, we've allocated resources for 300 new apprenticeship seats and about 700 new adult basic education seats. We're going to continue with the graduate retention plan so we can retain our young people in the province, so we can provide that same incentive we implemented in 2007, whereby a graduate from SciAster University or Regional College can earn up to $20,000 back in their tuition if they'll stay in the province. Ladies and gentlemen, over 40,000 graduates have taken advantage of that program since 2007. Think about that. We used to buy luggage when our kids graduated from post-secondary. We used to get them luggage for graduation presents, and now we're picking them out, maybe picking out apartment warming or housewarming gifts, because 40,000, and we don't actually need to give them much because they're getting up to $20,000 of their tuition back under that program. $4.6 billion has been invested in our students and our post-secondary system. We've identified the fact that when it comes to human resources, the most important source for people coming into our workforce and being engaged are people that are underemployed in this province today. Not only, but First Nations and Métis, for example. That's why we've increased funding to institutions like the SIIT, Saskatchewan Indian Institute of Technology, by 48%, why we're seeing a gradual reduction in Aboriginal unemployment, though it is still too high. It is also why we again have another all-of-the-above approach, though, why we've redoubled this government's efforts to have newcomers come to this province. And we very much appreciate the theme of this particular conference. In 2007, there was 3,500 newcomers that came to Saskatchewan as a result of our immigration efforts. The most recent year of reporting, we're up to 11,000. When you add in all the families, you get to the point where 60,000 of that new 100,000, that got us to 1.1, 60,000 of those are newcomers to Saskatchewan. We were recently on a trade mission in Southeast Asia, and we were in the Philippines. I was in Manila. I was speaking to the Canadian Filipino Chamber of Commerce there, and it was interesting. I was able to point out for the crowd that we were met that day in the most dense city on earth, 43,000 people per square kilometer. I said, I'm from Saskatchewan. We have 2. The point is, we have room. You may wait a little longer on Idlewild, but we have room. There might be some traffic that you didn't see on Albert Street, but let's not forget, we have room for more, and we need more. We're going to continue to work on an all-of-the-above approach when it comes to human resources. Third component of our growth plan is competitiveness. This manifests itself in a number of ways. We're currently undertaking a red tape reduction process within the government of Saskatchewan because we want to be competitive. We want to make sure that our labor laws are fair to both sides, but balanced and therefore competitive with other jurisdictions. We want to make sure that our royalties are competitive. We are a resource powerhouse in this province, and we ought not to risk that by engaging in what I would call unstable royalty practices. In fact, we identified that uranium royalties were high in the last budget, and we're bringing those down, and we're very excited about the potential for uranium going forward. We see great potential for growth in this area, and that kind of growth is important for our growth plan because the companies involved in uranium extraction, frankly, have a better record than any other companies that I'm aware of in the country in terms of employing Aboriginal Canadians, and specifically First Nations and Métis people from this province. Cameco, I think, has about 45% of their frontline mining careers, good careers, are First Nations and Métis people. So, by the way, that's why we've worked with our federal government to encourage them to conclude a nuclear cooperation agreement with places like China and India. Other countries have them, but we haven't, even though we're a uranium powerhouse in the world. To the credit, by the way, of the federal government and the Prime Minister, who has taken this on very directly, they have indeed concluded nuclear cooperation agreements with both China and India. The China agreement alone could mean $3 billion in uranium sales from our province just over the next 10 years. It's a big deal. Some of you have heard me tell the story about how I found out for sure that the Prime Minister would be raising this with his counterpart in Beijing. But maybe some of you haven't. It bears telling again because it was a surreal moment. I'm lucky I get lots of surreal moments in this job. It was a Saturday, and we were expecting a call from the Prime Minister's office just before they were heading out to Beijing. Excuse me. And the call never came in, and so we decided we couldn't wait. Tammy and I went shopping for groceries at Safeway. It's where I get all my good advice. I remember I was in the produce section, and my cell phone rang. And so the call was now coming in. And at the end of the cell phone was one of those rhetorical questions that you get, well, no, that we don't actually get very often, but a rhetorical question that there's only one way to the answer, and the question is, the Prime Minister is holding, will you take his call? And I felt like saying, well, I'm right in the middle of picking up some bananas, and there's people waiting, but sure, we'll take the call. Had a brief discussion. He confirmed for me there that he would be specifically raising this, that he wanted to conclude a nuclear cooperation agreement with China. And would First Nations be supportive? Would unions be supportive? Would companies in Saskatchewan be supportive? We had a brief chat, and I felt very good after that. I hung up and I caught up with Tammy. She was further down the store in Safeways, and so she said, so who was that? And I said, this is the Prime Minister of Canada. What did he want? He wanted to talk about a nuclear cooperation with the People's Republic, a nuclear cooperation agreement with the People's Republic of China. Who was that really? There's more good news on the uranium front. I've dwelt too long on this, but let me tell you very quickly. CETA, the trade deal with Europe, holds great promise for this province because of the barriers it'll bring down in agriculture. That is a big deal. We were very much involved in that process. The federal government ensured they involved all of the provinces to make our case, and we're pretty excited about what it means for agriculture, but it means good things for uranium too, because we proposed something very specific in the trade negotiations. We knew that European companies that already had bought stakes in our uranium sector here wanted to be free of a federal restriction on uranium ownership of mines. Right now we have the non-resident ownership provisions of the federal government that restrict uranium companies, unless they're Canadian, from owning more than 50% of a mine. And companies like Rio Tinto, for them it meant possibly not going ahead with their mine here in Saskatchewan. They may decide not to, even as it is, but now that restriction is gone, and it's gone because of the European trade deal and a point that we made with the federal government. We're grateful for their cooperation in this regard. So we need to be competitive, whether it's royalties. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to say this, if I may. This is perhaps an important message for our government, as much as it is for any other level of government. We need to be competitive with all other taxes. As a government, we're working hard to make sure that any tax increase is an absolute last resort. We've been working hard in the last 6 years to reduce taxes, to lower taxes. All of us as governments need to ensure that when we are looking at revenue opportunities, that our first choice, our first option is not tax increases. We have a lot of building to do in this province to keep up on the infrastructure front. And we're going to get that building done. To the extent we need some revenue, we will very reluctantly look potentially at something on the tax side, maybe on EPT. You might have some counsel for us when we meet at the Bear Pit on Wednesday. But if we do, I can tell you it will be the very last resort of the government, as we are going to balance the budget, and we're going to try to do it in all years without looking at any sort of a tax increase. We also need to avoid sending any messages to job creators in our economy that can be sent sometimes with tax increases, or that can be sent with perhaps an excessive use of mill rate factors that make businesses think twice about how they're invested here today and how they might want to invest tomorrow. We need to also continue to see the kind of municipal cooperation that we are seeing on an increased basis. I want to credit you and thank you in this regard. I want to thank Kevin Phillips, our MLA, who's the lead secretary for this particular area, and the minister, Jim Ryder, who have made municipal cooperation a priority, but of course the thanks mostly belongs with all of you, with those who have reached out to your counterparts at the rural level and other municipalities to try to find ways to work together to reduce barriers to future investment. If there's something else we can do to be a force for good on that front, to provide some incentives, please let us know, as we want to be a part of that in a voluntary way going forward. Innovation and building the next economy is the fourth component of the growth plan. I won't dwell on that except to tell you there's some exciting things happening in innovation in the province, especially down in the southeast corner of Saskatchewan at BD3, where that clean coal, that carbon capture and sequestration project is an international leader in being seen as such. Very recently, a British MP who came and had a look at Boundary Dam 3, named Dan Biles, said this: "I find it quite ironic that the international community is throwing bricks at Canada for pulling out of Kyoto, and there is the perception that perhaps Canada is not embracing the climate change challenge in the way that some other countries are. And yet here we are in Canada, learning why you guys are further ahead in terms of implementing a major technology like carbon capture and storage." His Consul General from the UK, Tony Kay, was just in the province last week, and he tweeted this: "Two refreshing things from Saskatchewan. One, world-leading carbon capture and storage technology. Two, minus 29 degrees. International engagement is the fifth element of our growth plan, ladies and gentlemen, and that's simply all of us telling our story, and we think the provincial government has a lead role to play there. We ought to support the Trade-Export Partnership STEP more than we do, and we've been increasing that support, and we will continue to increase it because they do a great job. We want to encourage municipalities in that outreach, and we know, for example, I met with Nipawin here just this summer. They're very much engaged with opportunities that come from China. It means international scholarships. It means trade missions from government that actually have a point where you go and work hard to conclude deals, to sign MOUs like we have with the Philippines now. We have the most unique and advantageous MOU with the Filipino Department of Labor that sets this province's recruitment of human resources effort aside, apart, above from any other jurisdiction in the province, in the country. Part of the reason we were able to get that agreement, by the way, is that we've passed the most strict foreign worker protection legislation in the country, even saluted for that by the Canadian Labour Congress. We're going to continue to tell Saskatchewan's story around the world, and we must. We're going to weigh in on things like COOL, country of origin labeling, in terms of our partners to the south, trade issues that are key to our economy. We will weigh in on Keystone as well. I've had people say, there won't be any Saskatchewan oil in Keystone. Why are you going on about that? Ladies and gentlemen, the differential, the discount at which your oil is sold because we don't get enough Canadian oil to Tidewater costs this Treasury about $300 million in any given year, and our industry $2 billion. Never mind the pipeline goes through southwest Saskatchewan, creating jobs. Never mind pipeline capacity issues will be dealt with in part, at least in the back end, when some back and light sweet crude is in the pipeline. We have a lot at stake in Keystone, including the overall relationship with our friends in the United States, who need to understand that the federal government and the provinces will speak out for interests in agriculture and oil, and we will make the case, as we've worked hard to do with respect to Keystone. The last component of our growth plan is maybe the most important. It's fiscal responsibility. We want to balance the budget. We want to listen carefully to what the auditor is saying in terms of reporting. We're going to do both of those things. We want to make sure that our partners are true partners in that process. We want to be upfront and honest about decisions we're going to take to get us to a balanced budget. People in this room will know well, they worked hard for it. The fact that revenue sharing formula is tied to the PST. It's predictable and responsible, and that's not going to change. Municipalities received $264 million in revenue sharing this last year, an 11.4% increase year over year at a time when our government spending is going up just by 3.2%. In the coming fiscal year, revenue sharing will dip slightly because of a change in how the PST revenue is calculated. It will be a short-term fluctuation. And PST revenue sharing revenue to the municipalities will then continue to increase. Revenue sharing will still be more than double what it was when our government took office. For example, the City of Regina, revenue sharing has gone from $15.7 million to $41 million, up 161%. Saskatoon revenue sharing up 166%. Melville up 165%. Assiniboia up 125%. And notwithstanding the adjustment this year in definition, I want to restate this very clear fact to this room. The government of Saskatchewan understands the importance of this partnership. We understand the fact that you are on the front line of growth, of meeting the opportunities and the challenges that come with growth. It is a partnership we value, and if we're going to be successful in meeting the challenges and exploiting the opportunities, we know we have to do it together. We have to work together. And if we're able to do that, if we're able to get that partnership right, this province is going to continue to grow. This province will meet the challenges related to growth. Forecasters expect us to have the second fastest growing economy among the provinces this year and third fastest in 2015. We have the lowest unemployment rate in the country. There are record exports and record investment. There's record oil production. The fastest growing cities in Canada are Regina and Saskatoon, but those cities still offer a quality of life. Friends, sometimes the perspective of a newcomer, and you've been focused on that and will be focused on that theme in the days ahead, can help us appreciate the fact that we need to continue down this road. I want to share an email with you I received very recently from someone who originally was from my hometown. It says, good afternoon, Premier Wall. I just wanted to pass on to you that I'm bringing my family back to Saskatchewan. And I can't be more excited to brag about this. I met my wife at the University of Lethbridge 10 years ago, soon moved to Red Deer, and soon after that found a home in Airdrie to start a family. After a vibrant career with Cisco Calgary, I was promoted to Cisco Canada, and from this point I continue to represent this great company out of Toronto and continue to move forward with my career with them. A few months ago I passed by my wife that it would be awesome if we could move back to raise our kids and live in the province that gives so much as I remember being raised in Swift Current. It didn't take much to convince her that Saskatchewan was our calling to come home. We currently found our new home last week in Regina, which is only 8 minutes and 15 seconds to my office. I can't even go to Tim Hortons in Airdrie in that amount of time. Not good when you need a cup of joe after a day in traffic for a couple hours. I held my realtor to a bet that she couldn't get us back to Regina before the Grey Cup. Well, she did. And we are so happy and excited to attend a Grey Cup party for the first time at home in our new home province. If you ever need an ambassador that is loud and proud, drop me a line. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the vision. That's the long-term plan manifested in an email. It's better than any economic report. It's better than any GDP pie chart that might show us doing all these wonderful things economically. It's why you do what you do. You want to build that kind of a city, town, or village, that kind of a province for that person to come home to want to come home to. That's what our growth plan is all about. And so I think it's fair that we should also make some resolutions. Sort of the societal economic equivalent of Jacob's bacon resolution, but this time with a long-term plan. We should resolve to not take growth for granted. We should remember how hard it is to deal with the very issues you're dealing with and we're dealing with a smaller tax base, with more people leaving than are coming, without the capacity in the long term to meet the challenges head on. And most of all, we should resolve that in the midst of all of this growth, that we would never lose those fundamental Saskatchewan values, those principles. That despite all of the success we've had as a province and that you've had as municipalities in that province, that we would ever be humble, that we would remember the Saskatchewan value of compassion, and that we would be hospitable, that we would never lose that value of hospitality, so that all of these newcomers, whether they've come from outside the province or maybe from here in Saskatchewan and now more engaged in the economy, that they would always feel very welcome, that they would know that this province that you are building and we are trying to build is still in the dream business, and we plan to stay there. For those people, because from those people, many people's strength. May God bless our province. Thank you.